There is a peculiar stillness that comes when the mind turns its gaze upon itself, a pause in the endless theater of thoughts, where something ancient and nameless peers back from behind the curtains. We spend our lives immersed in the river of doing, building identities, collecting roles, carving names into the shifting sands of time, yet rarely do we stop and ask, who is it that is living this life? This is the one question, so deceptively simple, that does not seek an answer, but rather dissolves the very one who is asking. It is not a question in the ordinary sense, not a puzzle to solve or a riddle to crack. It is a mirror placed in the hands of a dreamer who has mistaken their reflection for who they truly are. And the moment this mirror is raised, the illusion of self begins to tremble. We are born into a world that trains us to be someone, to accumulate traits like ornaments on a mannequin. From the very first moment language is wrapped around our consciousness, we are told stories of who we are supposed to be, boy or girl, good or bad, successful or forgotten. Our parents, teachers, and peers become sculptors, chiseling our sense of self with the blunt tools of approval and rejection. We learn to say I the way an actor slips into costume, and soon the costume becomes skin. Yet deep within there remains a faint hum, an unclaimed awareness that silently watches this character called me stumble through the grand drama of existence. That hum is the forgotten home, the sky behind the passing clouds. But to hear it, one must dare to step outside the stage and ask, who am I truly if I let go of every story I've been told? This question is not an intellectual exercise. It is a blade that cuts through the entire edifice of identity. Imagine a spider's web glistening in the morning sun, delicate yet intricate, each strand connecting to countless others. Our sense of self is just such a web spun from memories, ambitions, fears, and desires, catching every passing moment to define who we are. But when we ask this question sincerely, it is as though a single drop of dew slides down the strands, shaking the entire structure loose. Suddenly, what seemed solid begins to shimmer, the lines blur, and the one who thought they were the spider realizes they are the open air itself, never bound to the web at all. The practical world has little room for such unsettling revelations. Modern life thrives on the continuity of self, the worker who shows up every day, the consumer who buys, the citizen who obeys. Our societies are machinery built around the presumption that the self is real and persistent. Questioning it is like yanking the thread from a tightly woven tapestry. One tug, and the pattern unravels. And yet, something within us yearns for this unraveling. Because buried beneath the layers of duty and persona lies a quiet ache, a sense that we are living someone else's life, or that we are forever chasing something that vanishes the moment we grasp it. The one question pierces that ache like a beam of moonlight through cracked stone, revealing that the chase itself is part of the illusion. There is a profound paradox here. The illusion of self is both the prison and the playground. It creates suffering through separation, yet also allows the dance of experience to unfold. The self is the mask consciousness wears to play among its own reflections. And to ask this question is to feel the mask loosen, not to destroy life's dance, but to remember that the dancer was never truly bound by the mask. It is to see life not as something happening to you, but as something happening as you, yet without a solid center that can be pinned down. Like the flame of a candle, the self flickers moment to moment, appearing continuous only because we do not look closely enough. Approaching this question requires courage, for it is not a gentle thing. It does not offer comfort or certainty. It offers the sky. When one sincerely asks who they truly are, all fixed boundaries dissolve. The roles you have worn crumble like dried leaves. The ambitions you carried become distant echoes. Even the body, once so obviously you, becomes just another pattern of sensations floating in the vastness. And what remains is something so silent, so expansive, that the mind cannot grasp it. Yet it is more intimate than breath. It has been here before your name, before your memories, before even the thought I am. It is not something you can lose, because it was never something you could own. It is what you have always been. And so this question is a doorway, not to another answer, but to the end of the search itself. It does not tell you who you are. It reveals there is no who to be found, only the raw, luminous fact of being. To glimpse this, even for an instant, is like watching the surface of a lake shatter into pure light. The illusion of self vanishes, and with it vanishes the tension of becoming. What remains is freedom, vast and borderless, wearing the shape of this moment. That is why this one question is not a trick of logic or an abstract theory. It is the thunderclap that awakens the dreamer. To enter the heart of this question is to walk through a hall of mirrors, where every reflection dissolves as you reach for it. The core of its power lies not in giving you a new answer, but in stripping away every false certainty you have built around the word I. At first, this can feel like a disorienting freefall, like pulling a thread and realizing it was the only thing holding the entire tapestry together. But as the familiar boundaries dissolve, what emerges is not emptiness in the bleak sense. It is spaciousness, a vast open field untouched by identity. This is the strange paradox at the center of the question. It annihilates the personal self, yet reveals a presence more enduring than anything the self could ever possess. The first theme that surfaces is the illusion of continuity. We imagine a solid me stretching across time, a single entity who was the child in old photographs, the teenager in faded memories, the adult in the mirror now. Yet, if you look closely, that continuity exists only as a story. Each moment of your life was experienced by awareness, freshly arising, unconnected to the last, except through thought. The child you remember no longer exists, not even as a fixed essence that traveled through time. Memory stitches together fragments and declares them one seamless being, but the seams are invisible only because we never look for them. When the question pierces this narrative, the illusion of a continuous self begins to crack like ice underfoot, revealing nothing beneath but the bottomless water of presence. The second theme is the constructed nature of identity. Every trait you believe defines you, your personality, your preferences, your history, was assembled from the outside in, like layers of paint on a blank canvas. From the moment you were named, expectations began to crystallize around you. Approval reinforced some colors, rejection scraped others away. Over years, these layers hardened into a mask so convincing you forgot it was ever painted. But when you turn inward and ask who is truly behind all of it, the mask begins to flake apart. You notice how moods shift, opinions evolve, desires contradict one another, yet you still try to bind them into a single, coherent character. This is like trying to tie together clouds and call it a statue. The self is not a thing, it is a pattern in constant motion, and the moment you stop clinging to the pattern, it unravels back into sky. Another profound concept emerges: the absence of a central controller. We assume there is a someone at the helm, making choices and steering the body through life. Yet when you observe closely, thoughts arise unbidden, feelings surge without permission, and actions often occur before any conscious decision is made. The sense of being a separate controller is an afterthought, a narration applied to spontaneous happenings. The mind says, "I did this," but the doing happened before the claim. When the question strips this illusion away, what is revealed is a kind of effortless unfolding. Life moves, choices appear, actions flow, but no solid self can be found pulling the strings. It is as if the current of a river suddenly believed it was the captain of its own waters. The fourth core theme is the emptiness that is full. When people first glimpse the absence of a separate self, they often fear that nothing will remain, that they will vanish into a cold void. But what actually remains is not nothingness. It is the pure being that was always here before you called it me. It has no shape, yet it allows all shapes. It is the silent screen upon which the entire movie of life is projected, yet it is untouched by the drama. This emptiness is not a deficit, but a boundless field, alive with everything. When the false self dissolves, what remains is not hollow. It is unimaginably full, like discovering that what you took to be a small candle was actually a doorway to the sun. Finally, there is the theme of freedom beyond identity. As long as you cling to the self as a fixed object, life feels like a maze to be navigated, a competition to win, a story to perfect. But when the question burns through the illusion, you see there was never anyone trapped in the maze. The walls were painted on air. Without the weight of a rigid self, every moment becomes unbound, fluid, fresh. Fear loses its anchor. Desire loses its chains. You no longer have to protect an identity or prove its worth, because there is nothing to defend. What remains is not a withdrawal from life, but an intimacy with it so total that the old boundary between self and world collapses. Life lives itself, and you are simply the space it flows through. These themes, continuity unraveling, identity dissolving, control vanishing, emptiness blooming, and freedom awakening, are not separate steps to understand but facets of a single jewel. They all reflect one truth. The self you think you are is a mirage, and seeing through it does not destroy you. It frees you to be what you always were. The question is the spark that ignites this recognition, and once lit, it spreads like wildfire through every assumption you ever carried about who you are. Imagine a lone traveler standing at the edge of a vast desert. All their life, they have carried a map said to hold the key to who they are. The map is worn, covered in scribbled notes from others, parents, teachers, lovers, enemies. It promises a hidden city at the desert's heart, where the true self waits. The traveler sets out, following the map with devotion, but the deeper they go, the more the landscape refuses to match its lines. Dunes shift, winds erase their footprints, and the city never appears. Eventually, exhausted, the traveler collapses, and in the silence between heartbeats, they notice something astonishing. The desert was never empty. Every grain of sand, every shimmer of heat, every breath of wind has been alive and moving through them. The city they sought was not a place. They were the vast desert all along. The map was only a story, and the one who thought they were following it dissolves like a mirage. This is what the question does. It takes the map you've called me and burns it in a single spark of doubt. At first, this feels like loss, but it is a liberation, because you realize you were never a traveler lost in the desert. You were the desert, dreaming you were small. The illusion of self is like that map, useful once, perhaps even necessary to begin the journey, but ultimately false. When the question unravels it, you awaken not as someone who has found themselves, but as the boundless presence that never needed finding. Another story whispers from the depths of myth, a mirror palace built by a king who feared death. He ordered its halls lined with mirrors so perfect they reflected not only form, but thought. As he walked through, the mirrors multiplied him endlessly, millions of kings, each one slightly delayed, each echoing his gestures like ghosts. Convinced this palace of reflections was his immortality, he lived there alone, speaking only to himself. Yet one night, a crack formed in a single mirror. He reached to mend it, and the moment his finger touched the fracture, every mirror shattered at once. In the sudden silence, no king remained, only the open night sky pouring in through the broken walls. This is how the self dissolves when the question is asked sincerely. The fortress of mirrors collapses, and where you expected to lose yourself, you discover only the infinite sky. There is also the parable of the river who wanted to be a statue. For ages it envied the mountains, proud and unmoving, while it itself was always changing, never the same from moment to moment. One day the river gathered its waters, forcing itself into stillness until it froze. At last it thought, "Now I am solid, now I am someone." But in that stillness, its song was gone, its reflections vanished, its fish lay trapped in glassy silence. Slowly, the sun rose and melted it, and the river remembered what it had always forgotten. Its beauty was not in being something, but in flowing as everything. The illusion of self is this same freezing, this attempt to crystallize the moving waters of being into a fixed shape called me. The question is the sun. When it touches you, the ice cracks and you remember how to flow. And then there is the most intimate story of all. The dreamer who forgot they were dreaming. In their dream, they built an identity brick by brick, a name, a body, a history, a future. They defended it fiercely because it seemed fragile. Yet the moment the question was whispered, "Who is dreaming this?" the dream shivered. Walls blurred, faces dissolved, time unraveled. The dreamer awoke in their own bed, laughing softly, realizing none of it had ever been real. What they thought was the fragile center of everything had only ever been a fleeting swirl in the mind's night sky. In the same way, when you ask this question with radical sincerity, the entire edifice of me begins to shimmer like smoke in sunlight. And what remains is not a new identity, but the raw, luminous fact of awareness itself, the silent witness that was dreaming the self all along. Each of these symbols, the desert, the shattered mirrors, the thawed river, the awakened dreamer, speaks to the same revelation. The self is a story told by patterns, a performance of continuity enacted by momentary flickers of experience. To cling to it is to be forever wandering, forever defending, forever afraid of vanishing. But to see through it is to vanish willingly, only to discover that what disappears was never real, and what remains cannot die. The question does not give you a new truth to hold. It takes the hands away entirely, leaving only the vastness they were trying to grasp. To see through the illusion of self is like stepping out of a tightly wound costume you did not know you were wearing. But once the costume falls to the floor, the world does not end. The ordinary still continues. Clocks still tick, mouths still speak, hearts still beat. And yet everything is transformed because the one you thought was piloting all of it is gone. What remains is not a void of detachment, as many fear, but a lucid intimacy with life itself. Integration, then, is not about becoming someone new who knows the truth, but about allowing the absence of that someone to gently reshape how you move through the world. At first, this can feel disorienting. Habits and roles still persist like echoes of a song that has stopped playing. You might still sign your name, argue a point, make plans, or feel emotions rise and fall. But now they are translucent, like reflections dancing on water. You can watch them happen without the old compulsion to believe they define you. Instead of, I am angry, it becomes, anger is passing through. Instead of, I must control this outcome, it becomes, this outcome is unfolding. It is not passivity, but a subtle untangling, like loosening your grip on a rope that was burning your hands. The rope was never pulling you, you were holding on. In relationships, this shift can be both gentle and radical. When the illusion of self softens, the walls between me and you lose their solidity. Compassion ceases to be something you must manufacture and becomes the natural gravity of your being. You begin to notice how much of human interaction is shaped by self-defensiveness, by two masks trying to protect their boundaries. Without the mask, there is nothing left to defend, and so listening becomes deeper, presence becomes effortless, and even conflict becomes less of a battlefield and more of a shared weather passing between skies. This does not mean you stop setting boundaries. Rather, boundaries become fluid expressions of care rather than rigid fortresses of ego. Work and ambition also take on new colors. The drive to prove your worth, to become someone, begins to lose its spell. You may still strive and create, but now it is less like climbing a mountain and more like painting a wave as it rises and falls. Success and failure lose their teeth because they no longer strike at the root of your being. They are simply shapes forming and dissolving in the ocean of awareness. This does not make you inert. It frees you to act without the hidden weight of fear, because there is no self at stake. Strangely, this often makes your actions more potent, not less, because they arise from clarity rather than desperation. Even suffering begins to transform. Pain still arises, but it is no longer amplified by the story of my pain or why this should not be happening to me. Instead, pain is seen as a pure event in consciousness, as impersonal and sacred as the sound of rain. This does not numb you, it makes you tender. You may weep, but the tears fall through open space, not through clenched fists. When there is no self to be crushed by suffering, what remains is a quiet willingness to let suffering move through and pass on, like wind through an open field. The question also reshapes your relationship with time. The self lives by projecting itself forward and backward, stitching memory and anticipation into a thread called my life. But when the self is seen through, that thread unravels. What remains is the immediate, vivid reality of this moment, this breath, this sound, this sensation. Life ceases to be a means to an end and becomes the end itself. You find yourself walking slower, listening more, tasting the world rather than racing through it. And in that slowing, there is a paradoxical quickening. Life feels more alive, not less, because you are no longer one step removed from it. Yet perhaps the most profound integration is the humility it brings. Seeing through the illusion of self does not make you superior or enlightened. It makes you transparent. It strips away the subtle arrogance of, "I am the doer," leaving behind a soft wonder that anything happens at all. You realize you are not standing outside life trying to control it. You are life, moving within itself. This humility is not weakness, it is the root of fearlessness. For how can you fear losing what was never yours to begin with? This is the quiet revolution the question brings. Not the death of functionality, but the death of false ownership. You still act, speak, love, create, but now each act is like a bell rung by the wind, arising from nowhere, belonging to no one, and fading into silence. And in that silence, the world glows with the strange beauty of being seen for the first time. And here the narrative enters its final convergence, where all the veils are stripped away, and the soul finally beholds the full architecture of the trap it has been circling. The reincarnation matrix is not an external prison, not truly. It is woven from every attachment, every desire, every fear you have ever clung to. Each lifetime has been a mirror, showing you the parts of yourself you refuse to face. Each identity you inhabited was just another mask your soul wore to delay the terror of its own boundlessness. You were never being punished, you were being invited to awaken. The exit is not dramatic. It is not a blazing rebellion or cosmic jailbreak. It is a soft and shattering surrender. The moment you stop grasping for meaning, stop trying to win at the human game, stop running from your own shadow, that is the moment the wheel begins to slow. The soul returns to its center, to the silent, still point that exists before and beyond all form. What remains is not you as a character, but you as the unbroken field that birthed every character. You realize you were never trapped inside the matrix, you were dreaming it, and now you are simply done dreaming. From this state, if you choose to return, you do not come back out of compulsion. You return out of love. You re-enter the human world not as one who is lost, but as one who remembers. You walk among the sleepers, not to escape with them, but to awaken them. The cycle no longer binds you because it no longer defines you. The matrix dissolves like mist, and you stand where you have always stood, limitless, eternal, and whole. This is freedom, and it was never somewhere else. It was hidden in the one place you never thought to look, inside the one who was seeking.